Hello, everybody.
And I say hello, hello, hello as well.
All right. Oh, Elk is. Hey, Elk.
Hi, Mike.
Made it right. You made it just in time. We just got started. So, a friendly reminder, of course, guys, if you haven't already, guys can
Like
like
and
and
share.
share the stream and see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here we talk about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions, and we'll try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. So
And
we're
I
gonna
have
we're gonna before we get into anything major, we're gonna just hang out for a couple minutes, see if we can give more people a chance to come in before we get started with anything major. So, anyways, how's your days go? How are your days? I just asked Rick this off, but I guess I'm asking him again. How do your days go today, guys? You guys have a fun Sunday today?
Yeah, I have a friend that comes over and we watch science, usually science fiction. We've been watching actually the Vikings for the longest time. We watched like, God, 6 seasons of it. That took like 6 months or more. And then I've been watching Battlestar Galactica, the rebooted version. We're into about 3.5 seasons of 4 seasons. I only saw, I love the original 78 series.
The one with Lauren Green, Aaron Gray, and Dirk Benedict.
Yeah, I think Aaron Gray was in Buck Rogers, but it was
Yeah, that's right, Buck Rogers. You're right.
but Lauren Green, and then they had Athena, and then they had the Solicitor in the original Cassiopeia, and,
Yeah.
and there were no women pilots; there were just men pilots, but the women were on the bridge crew in semi less combatant roles. And yeah, I love the series. I always thought that the Battlestar Galactica spaceship design is my favorite spaceship design of any series, and I'd probably roll that into the remake in 2007 too. But for some reason I love the I don't know, the mixture of realism, if that's the word. They look actually functional, like they'd be constructed with tools that we made now, with just a little bit of extra, zazz. I even like the remake because it actually has kinetic bullet weapons, which in space would work perfectly, would work like much like why when you have a nearly perfect thing, you have bullets that fire and there's no gravity to change their arc or slow them down. So they, go for millions and millions of miles in the direction you fire them. So why would you have lasers when bullets would work perfectly? So yeah, I love this series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I watched the original as a kid. I don't remember if I watched all the episodes. I do have the original on DVD. When I get my own place and everything set up, I'm gonna have to watch it. But I have watched all the new one, uh, every episode. Although the sequel slash prequel Cornucopia, I haven't watched it yet. I think it's Cornucopia, where they, go on
Caprica.
Caprica. Yeah, I haven't watched that yet. I'd like to watch it. I've watched some of the new. I think I've watched all the movies that go along with the Battlestar Galactica remake.
There's Razor is one of them. That and I'm not. They did webisodes too. This is back when like YouTube in 2007. It was either
Yeah,
even before YouTube or just at the birth of YouTube. So they posted like little webisodes, they called them, which were just like 10-minute shorts that you could watch. You could watch or not watch it. You didn't need them to understand the plot, but they were like little bonus items.
yeah. I don't think I've watched those, but I'd like to see them. Well, heck, Stargate did that too, um, as well. It followed some adventures of Catherine. I think it was Catherine, the lady that hired Daniel Jackson. The little girl and all that. She apparently went through the Stargate once, forgot all about it. But I think her memory was really silly. they go into why she doesn't remember. But that was pretty good too. That little series. Again, it was web episodes, so they were like 10, 15 minutes long. So
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I did see that Metal was on a few minutes ago on Facebook, but I guess he went off. So I was hoping he'd be here soon, and I was hoping Apex might come in at least for the first half hour, so we go over the what we read on Friday, but where we got into some of the other stuff. Let's see. So we're past 6 minutes now, so I guess we can kind of get started on some stuff here. So what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys. We're gonna go counterclock. We're gonna start with Elk and go up to Rick, and then we'll probably just move into the material. I'll probably talk about what we read on Friday, and we'll get into what the other big thing that's been getting talked about a lot the last few days here. So before we get started, I'm going to give you guys a chance to do an intro. Of course, as always, introduce yourselves, tell everybody who you are, what you do. If you have anything to promote, feel free to promote it. If you have any links to share, feel free to share them. You guys know the shtick by now, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so we're gonna start with you. We're gonna go counterclockwise this time. We're gonna start out counterclockwise. We may end up just going clockwise at the end here, but we'll start counterclockwise. So, Elk,
okay. I am a lifelong consumer of genre fiction, especially science fiction, cartoons, live action. Love science fiction. I've always loved classics like Sherlock Holmes and 19th century sort of genre fiction like Frankenstein and Dracula and King Arthur, although he was big in the 19th century, but he goes back many centuries before that. And I've always that's not true. I haven't always kept up on it. I dipped out in my 20s because I got too cool for a lot of cartoons and a lot of comic books and a lot of graphic novels and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, well I remember from '93 there was King Arthur and the Knights of Justice cartoon.
Yeah. I have no projects that I'm publicly. I'm working on some things behind the scenes, but nothing that I care to announce.
You're not ready to promote yet.
Yeah. So thanks for having me here.
All right, Rick, you know the score. Go for it.
Well, I just put a link in. I've got a channel here on YouTube, and just put the link that I put in is to a painting. I went out into the city. I went to a place called Pier 4, and I did a little bit of painting. It was just the emblem of my Canadian Shield. So it's something I'm planning on doing, getting around the city and doing stuff. I've actually got another one, or part one of another one that I'm going to be putting up today or tomorrow. Probably tomorrow. It's a 15-minute long one. I'm not sure whether I should shorten them or not, but or just let them play out as I paint something somewhere in the city. And again, it's going to be Pier 4.
Oh yeah, I think you did post something up last night with that, right?
I think it was
or Friday, sometime over the last couple of days you did.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it wasn't the full video because it didn't get recorded. The whole thing didn't get recorded. I thought it did, but found out it did. My phone to paint, but it's something that I'm finding out various things to do and not do as I do this to figure it out to record myself painting wherever in the city. So hopefully people will enjoy stuff as we go along with that.
All right. All right. So anything more you want to add or share before we
Well, if you like that video, just like it and maybe subscribe and hopefully we're gonna have more in the near future for that sort of stuff. I'm hoping to get out tomorrow for another um, thing. I'm gonna try and go out Monday through Friday unless it's raining or something like that, or I've got a job interview or something like that. Something that interferes.
Are they, just trying to build up your content more, right?
Yeah.
All right.
And something people might find interesting.
All right.
And,
well,
I might be doing my characters, I might be doing other people's characters, or I just might be doing the scenery that I see.
All right. All right. Well, with all that out of the way now, so before so the first thing, of course, I want to talk about is what Apex and of course, Rick, I'll be having you on this Friday night for the historical comic retrospective with quality. We'll be going through some of the stuff from Quality Comics that came out in February 1940. But this past Friday night had Apex from Apex Comics on. We were reading through Prize Comics Volume 1, Issue 2. Elk, I believe you were in the chat during a portion of that, right?
Yeah, I saw the first story about Electro Man. Was that
Power Nelson?
Power Nelson. That's right.
Power Nelson, the man of the future. It's kind of funny. Like for me, that was probably the story that stuck out the most in that, just simply because it was written, the story was written obviously late 39, early 40. It was went on newsstands in like February 1940, so it would have been written in probably sometime in the previous 6 months, I would gather, before it was published. But what they thought back in 39, 40, what they thought just 40 years down the line would be like, right? Because in that story it was like 1982, 2 world wars had happened. We were already, we were kind of like what we would see later with the Jetsons. We were kind of like in a almost futuristic kind of situation, even though you had the great divide between the haves and the have-nots in it as well.
Yeah. Unfortunately, most of the stuff for the future in cartoons or whatever, they don't go far enough into the future, in my opinion, because they usually only go 30 or 50 years, and it's never as good as what they think.
Right. Yeah, you would get the impression that what they're thinking more like possibly 200 or 300 years in the future, more than likely. But
I actually like Power Nelson. That was probably the thing I liked most about the show, was that it was set in the 80s, and they thought, sitting as a writer in 1939, he thought that 2 more world wars were going to be fought, whereas they were just facing down. I guess it was 1939, so World War II. And I'm not sure when it was written.
Okay, he would have been right. The writer would have been writing it, I'm guessing, in the 6 months prior, because the release date was technically February 1940. That's when that particular comic went on sale on newsstand. Okay, February 1940. Cover dated, I believe, March or April of 40, but basically it went on sale on newsstands in February of 1940. So It would have likely meant that they would have been writing that sometime within the 6 months prior to that. So it probably would have been the latter half of 39 into early 40.
Either just before or just after the Second World War started.
The war would have kicked off by then. And even if the war had kicked off since between when he wrote it and when he published it, they probably would have changed it if it was that big an event. But yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I thought it's actually it connected with the idea that actually there's a number of people, and not just alarmists, I think, that were in World War III, and we're talking about that when the Iran, Israeli, American, British, Saudi, Jordanian, Syrian, Lebanese, Hamas conflict all was kicking off. and Iran was openly firing missiles at Israel. Commentators, again, not alarmists, but actual think tanks and political scientists, thought that, yeah, with the war in the Ukraine and Iran and North Korea selling arms to Russia and China, perhaps, and China basically funding with oil purchases, and India, by the way, funding with oil purchases from Russia, the Russian war effort, that an open conflict between Israel and Iran would probably draw in America. And even that missile strike drew in Jordanian Air Force and British Air Force and assets. So the whole Middle East was being divided by that one missile strike, and had Iran and Israel or Iran and America decided to make it go further, again, what we would consider World War III, which may have started months ago, would have really kicked off and enlarged itself. So I just thought that was interesting that this guy thought that there'd be 2 world wars by the 80s. And by the hair of our teeth, we avoided a world war in the 80s. And
well, yeah, I mean, because ever since after World War II, we did have the Cold War tensions.
Yeah.
That
he might have thought that too, because what 1920 to 1945, so that's 25 years, right? So 1940 to the 80s is 40 years. So I guess he figured that was enough time to conclude World War II, which was just starting, and then another one to happen in that time.
Hello,
just go.
Good night, Spoon.
Hey, good night, Spoon.
Is it Christmas? No, it's not Christmas already.
Spoony.
And of course, if you haven't already, if you can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we get some more friendly people here to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, as always, if anything grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and we will try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. Right now, we're just kind of going over what Apex and I read in on Friday, on the historical comic retrospect on Friday. We're just discussing the first story. Yeah, I mean, just the whole idea of what he thought just 40 years into the future was just kind of interesting to me. So then we, of course, had Jupiter, the Master Magician. We had Black Owl, and we had Storm Curtis. Those three were pretty good, too. Of course, we had kind of the idea of, particularly in the Black Owl story, where the girl who's a private detective, which was a pretty pro-feminist move back then. A woman being a private detective like that, and she, it's like, and again, as you see with many heroes, where they have to feign, kind of frailness or weakness to where nobody will catch on that they're actually a superhero, right? And we saw that in the Black Owl story. So anyway, Goodnight Spoon has a couple more things to say here. Let's see. Only streams at the level of your piracy episode motivate me to depress the button of like. Let's see. Hi, Elk. So anyways,
I had a question actually, and I'm embarrassed because I went and had dinner instead of listening to the whole stream. I couldn't watch it on my phone while I prepared dinner because I had other people over. But are any of these stories, like, people now say, oh, well, I just want comics to be a good story, which I think is an impossible statement and is actually disingenuous and is not really what they mean. But I mean, when you look at these early Golden Age stories, I actually think which I thought was almost impossible. They do actually reach the very low level of, this is just a story. This is just a bunch, as Homer Simpson put it, this is just a bunch of stuff that happened. It's not like a drama or something. Like there's no themes, there's no underlying themes, there's no conflicts being resolved. There's definitely no characters being grown. These are just one-off.
Well, I wouldn't agree. I think it may not be in the same vein that it is later, but I think there is a certain growth. It may not be as much as you think or as much as you would like.
Be interesting. Like what themes do you think were in the stories from Friday?
Well, maybe not Friday. Maybe not Friday exactly. I wasn't there, but sometimes they just have fighting crime gangsters. Sometimes different minor things like that, and sometimes there's minor character growth throughout the story. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. But I agree with you. The stories, they just reach plausible goodness, because a lot of times there's plot holes that you can drive, like a Mack truck through or something even bigger. I'm famous for pointing them out.
And passable, they just want pretty pictures and passable dialogue. I mean, I don't. Yeah, the stories for the most. I mean, now we've seen a few. We have seen a few stories though that were more serial, but most of the stories back then were more episodic. In other words, they were more standalone stories. But of course, Rick knows, one of the stories that was a bit more serial that we did read through was Namor. The Namor story was more serial. There was a bit of a plot.
I missed that one. I wish I had.
The first Sheena story, the Sheena story that we're going through in Fiction House, that one's a bit more serial. So
yeah, a lot of them are serial but episodic at the same time. They do have a little bit of continuity. A lot of them don't.
Let's give them one. They're asking for epic narrative and bleed parts.
What were you about to say in there? Anyways, I think one of us.
Well, I wish I had have seen Namor and that's the Namor that turned into the DC character, right? Real
Marvel.
Yeah, the Marvel Aquaman. Sorry, yeah, he turned into the Marvel version of Aquaman, and he got a bit of an arc. But I mean, these stories, I really thought, I didn't think a story could be as thin gruel. If you read 19,
they still were a reflection of time, of the time that they were in too.
They barely reflect anything. They're just basically like, let's fight crime. We're going to fight crime. The villains are going to kidnap it. It's not even, doesn't even reach the levels of James Bond silliness. It's just like someone commits a crime, someone sees him commit a crime. Sometimes he changes into a superhero outfit, or he's just like a super tough guy and goes in and beats up 3 bad guys, and then the cops arrive. And I guess that's a simple, it brings up the idea of law and order, or the ultimate social good means just punishing criminals and obeying the law, which is one level of considering this is the time of the communist scare and Red Scares and the battleship Potemkin and the Russian Revolution and the Bavarian Revolution and the Hungarian Revolution, and all these, considering all the political turmoil there was, that America pumped out these stories just claiming that the highest social good was just to obey the law, and it should never be disobeyed. And if you did, you were a criminal, and you were only doing it for greed, and you should just be put in jail, and you would be put in jail. I guess that's such a narrow.
I think though that is something to aspire to striving to be good and striving to do what is right. And that was what the main theme of a lot of these stories were. Ultimately to strive to do what is right. And obeying the law is part of that.
It didn't seem to be part of it. It seemed to be all there was to it. Like there's no subtlety. Like one of the gangsters was a good family man, or enjoyed feeding his family and taking care of them and sending them to school, or quote wanting them to go legit, like some label.
Are you saying that you actually want to aspire to be bad? Are you saying that you want to aspire to be evil?
No, I just think he's saying he wants the characters to be a little bit more complex.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a lot of complexity. Frankly, just obeying the law does not make you a good person in my mind. That's not even, that's maybe 10% of it, but that's not day in and day out. Laws are so I mean, obeying the law does not make you a good person. I mean, most homeless people actually they fall afoul of silly laws, but for the most part they're nonviolent, the nonviolent ones. And although there are many homeless people that do break the law, most of them don't. And I don't think sitting on a park bench doing drugs or something, or doing prescription drugs makes you a good person. Although the homeless, but even the homeless one is fraught, because I think a lot of those people do break the law, and I'm not sure that they really all deserve to be thrown in jail. But most of them, day in and day out, do obey the law. They just wander around and pick up pop bottles out of garbage bins and so on, in our city at least. I don't think obeying the law is even 10% of what makes you a good person. And I don't think even those who strive to break the law are
you shouldn't discount it either. You shouldn't discount it either.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like you're just discounting the whole idea of obeying the law and trying to be good.
No, you're conflating two things. You're conflating two entirely different things. Trying to be good and obeying the law, in my mind, are two nearly entirely different things that only overlap at about 10%.
Yeah. Well, I think I get where Alki's coming from. In these stories, they're a lot more simpler. People in general are a lot more complex usually than most of these stories back then. And unfortunately, comics at this point was in its infancy, and the medium, they weren't into telling complex stories like they got into and they are now. In fact, as we know, it's probably not going to be until 70s or 80s where they start telling a little bit more complex stories and doing a lot more character growth in characters. They keep it episodic. And right, it takes a lot more to be a good person than just obeying the law. Like there's lots of, shall we say, mobsters out there that on the surface you look at them and they look like good people.
Yeah, like the Rizzuto Montreal. As a rule, I don't think the older guy got arrested since he was like 22 or something, but he was the mob boss of Montreal for decades, and he never got caught breaking the law. And but that doesn't make him a good person, even though he collected tens of millions of dollars from the Liberal Party through the government in the Canada sponsorship scandal, which we remember back from the Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin days. Yeah. The Canadian government gave about a couple of $100 million just for pro.
I was going to say, there's lots of people that go to church that appear to be good people.
Well, it's kind of funny you mentioned that, Rick, because I'm reminded of the Stephen Curtis Chapman song "More to This Life," which somewhat has a line like that in there.
Obeying the law doesn't make you a good person. There's more to being a good person than just obeying the law. Whether it's 10%,
but you shouldn't discount that either.
These
stories back in the golden age were probably a lot more simplistic as compared to today, but I don't think you should outright discount them either just because they were simplistic. I think it's ultimately it's always better to do good than evil.
I think you're totally dragging two concepts. As like Goodnight Spoon says in the Venn diagram of right, fair, and legal, there is very little overlap. like Enron, for instance, right up to the very end was legal, and they were a pyramid scheme worth a couple of $1 billion or something through selling and reselling electricity contracts. And all of that was legal until they couldn't cover all the money they owed people. And then suddenly, then and only then did it become illegal. But I think, and there are lots of people, like, does a guy who speculates like I do on the stock market, only if someone's better at it than I am and they're able to, speculate their way to $3 million in 3 years and then retire, buy a house, and live off their dividend earnings for the rest of their life. They've never done anything that's illegal. Yet I don't particularly view someone, in a house in Muskoka who doesn't work from age 30 to age 70 when he dies to be particularly good. I mean, not even particularly bad if he's not breaking the law, but I don't think that's particularly good. There's lots of subtleties. I guess what we see now in most dramas is when conflicts between your obligations towards your family and your obligations to the law or to the public, when they cross, when they don't match up, you have to sometimes choose between the two of them. And I think that makes for interesting drama. I mean, drama is all about conflict, right? And
well, let's look at the time too that these comics were made in too. Yeah. Let's take that into consideration as well.
Yeah.
America as a whole was coming out of the Depression. We're just, we're still a year away from entering the war ourselves.
Yeah.
People, do you really think that as people were struggling, with finances, with supporting their families, do you really think they wanted, or even needed to be, reminded of anything complex?
Oh my God, yes. The 1930s was one of the most complex decades in American 20th century history.
I don't agree. I think ultimately, I think people needed ultimately to be, they needed something to aspire to, something to look up to, something to aspire to come out of what they were in.
Yeah, but we're talking about the decades there were political revolutions all over South, and they were all over Europe. There was the Bavarian People's Republic. There was the Munich Commune. There was a revolution in Poland. There was the Russian Civil War into the 20s.
And most Americans probably didn't really care too much about that.
Oh, heck, that's completely false. The American labor was born in the 30s.
Did not care a lot about that.
There were giant.
You probably had some academics who did, but America was still a pretty isolationist country at that point. So
I was gonna say, that's what I said earlier. Comics at this point were simplistic. It was a new medium. And we had radio, TV, which were a lot more simplistic. People were wanting, I guess, escapism in a way. But there were things out there that were complex, a little bit more regular novels and all that. You still had Shakespeare and all that going around, which was a lot more complex. Stuff with a lot more history had it. And unfortunately, again, it needed to be built up. And, and I think, El can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's surprised even with the simplicity of it that they were actually fairly decent stories. And I think that's what his initial point was. Am I right, El?
I actually didn't. I actually have been. I haven't even barely raised to the height of enjoying these stories, to be honest. Because you're not talking about like the medium itself may have been new, but if you look at 19th century cartooning, it's complex, it's multifaceted. They were usually arised out of like one panel political cartoons that were elaborate and had text and had all sorts of things. There were elaborate themes in them. And if you look at you don't even have to look at the 30s was crammed with great literature, like John Steinbeck was writing his novels about the Depression. There were all sorts of novelists who were talking about human struggles. And there's F. Scott Fitzgerald.
And that's where that belonged. The comics here, as Rick said, part of it being a new medium, part of it being the need for escapism. We're more, and basically just the need to find something to aspire to. That was why they were more.
It was also the gangster era where, like, there was not Cagney and Lacey, Bonnie and Clyde, and there was the Mobsters Inc. era.
The gangsters were in the novels, or not in the novels, but in the comics, and they were depicted as evil, because they did go out and kill people. They did go out and sell drugs to people.
I don't think so much drugs in that era, but
there were. I've read some stories where there was talk about dope warehouses and all that.
But there's a complexity right there. In the 1930s, it was illegal to sell booze through the actual U.S. constitutional amendment and the Volstead Act that preceded it. And Canada, once again, tagged along and outlawed the sale of booze, except for wine and except for medicinal purposes, and had all these holes in it. So middle-class people could go to their doctor and literally get a prescription for a health tonic that was all gin or all whiskey or all vodka. And middle-class people went there. And they also enjoyed wine. Wine was almost strictly a middle-class beverage in Canada. And it was legal. Wine was always legalized during Canadian Prohibition. And again, American distillers like the Bronfmans, whose family are still billionaires in both America and in Canada, there's different wings, made their billions, or the equivalent of their billions, through selling booze legally manufactured in Canada, illegal to sell in Canada, but legal to ship, as far as Canadian law went for many years, into the United States. And there's another one, like John F. Kennedy, his father, was it Alexander Kennedy? What was Kennedy's father's name?
Okay.
He made
Elk. Can you pause just for a moment here? So medals here, due to prohibition being widely unfavorable, you'd be stretched. You classify gangsters that sold boozes
as strictly bad
based on public appeal. Metal, I know I sent you the link if you want to join us in the studio here. Because I know I sent you the link if you want to join us in the studio, and there was another thing I wanted to get to in the conversation too. Aside from this, we just got onto this, and we'll probably just stick with this for a little while more. Then we'll get to the other thing I was going to talk about. It was actually something you asked me about the other day, Elk. But anyways, Metal, if you want to join us in the studio, I think I sent you the link via Facebook Messenger. So why don't you?
Here's a complex character from the 30s, Joseph Kennedy. He made his living as a booze smuggler, and his son became president of the United States, and his other son became attorney general of the United States. And allegedly, they were put in power by the Giancani family in Chicago. Allegedly gave them enough Kennedy votes to win. Where the heck is Chicago? What state? Illinois. Which put him over the top to win the election. There's all these complex characters, and again, if you look at 19th century, if you look at 1930s literature, there's lots of complexity. If you look at the 20s with F. Fitzgerald, if you look at Jane Austen, if you look at Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and a century beforehand.
Elk, I think Rick is trying to say something. Elk, give him a chance to say to respond.
Nobody's saying that there wasn't complex characters back then, and that complex characters are needed in every medium for sure. no matter what you're covering. Unfortunately, when you've got something in infancy, you don't usually get a lot of complexity in it. You know, uh, you know, comics are usually short stories, so they probably didn't figure out how to do that. You know, sometimes you can have the complex stories in a short story, but not usually. You know,
It's not. It's like
and
you don't try to shove a steak into a baby's mouth that just came out of the womb.
yeah. Also, I was going to say, and at the time, they were more meant for kids. Although a lot of stuff that they covered in them, you know, we think kids. Oh, geez, I wouldn't want my kid reading that today.
Yeah, the true crime ones. Yeah.
Well, true crime didn't, I think, happen for till the 50s or 60s.
Well, yeah, in a way though, kids were more because they had to be. Kids were a little bit more mature because you already had kids at 12, 13 who were out in the workforce already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they had to be.
Like Newsies.
Yeah, kids were probably a lot more. Kids were probably a lot more mature back then than they are today. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like the Disney movie Newsies about the newspaper sellers who are mainly like preteen or tween kids. I think it was in New York where they tried to unionize, and they got beaten up, and all by very law-abiding, middle managers at the newspapers who beat the crap out of them and robbed them. But
you will not be
on. That's one thing I always thought comics. I always think as a medium, it has so much potential because it's basically like a movie with an unlimited special effects budget. It's just the imagination of your pen, and to show these stories such thin gruel is disappointing, actually.
And then I think it also, for back then too, I think it might have depended on the company that you was doing it. I think probably different companies did different things. So you had DC and Marvel, which focused on the stuff. On like heck, when Namor first appeared, as far as I'm concerned, he was a straight up villain. And in some ways he was a very complex. You could say he was somewhat of a complex character, really. Being the straight up villain, and he's the lead of the story. It's not really
what you would expect in that episode. Is Namor in the title of the episode in Mike's back catalog here somewhere?
No, he doesn't usually put who it is. But we read. I'm not sure whether he puts. Maybe that's something that he should put in the title. What books we're going over, or what company and month and year. But that's up to Mike to do for each week if he wants to. But yeah, the first Namor story, even a lot of Namor story, he was, in my opinion, straight up villain. Like this guy, he was murdering people and all that, just because, people were polluting the ocean and stuff like that, or and I might be oversimplifying it or whatever, but it wouldn't be as complex as today, but
Oh, were you telling Elk and Spoon about some of our debates about the Namor stories?
Well, I wasn't really saying about our debates, but that the first Namor story, and probably more after. I don't think I read everyone with you, but you've read a few of them. And that he's straight up villain. I'd say that's fairly complex, and maybe they're not all.
Well, that part is a bit more complex because as even I pointed out, to our world, to the service world, he would be considered a villain, but to his own people, he'd be considered because the way they look at it from their perspective is that the surface world is doing harm to their, world, their ocean, their homes.
Yeah, and this is a guy that didn't even try to negotiate nothing. He just, you he didn't even think twice.
Yeah, actually, that sounds interesting. I'll go back and watch that. I'll definitely watch your discussion of it. Because again,
we will most likely next hit Marvel on June. I believe it'll be June 28th because I think Apex will be back with me on that. We might,
when
but
did
what
we
you can
do?
you can also do if you want to go back and try to figure out when I probably did some of the Marvel stories. If you want to go back and read, watch some of those programs, you look to the community tab because at least through the last couple of months here, I've been I've been putting like what I'm going to be reading, and then with the co-host and all that, so you can figure out.
I'm not sure.
My community tab.
Obviously, maybe not going back, but maybe in the title for the retrospect, you should put maybe at least what company that we're doing that week, or you're doing whatever week, because it might be able to.
You just look at it through the community tab. I think the way I have it set up in the community tab, it works.
I get that, Mike, but you might be able to get viewers by just putting that on thing. But it's up to you. It's just a suggestion, And I don't mean go back and do it all. I just mean going forward, But it's again, it's up to you, what you do. It's your show. But I was gonna say, do you know approximately when we did that first Namor story for Marvel?
Let's see. Well, I could probably go take a quick peek here,
just so we give Elk an idea.
Well, because I know that these stories were probably like so.
I'm looking up the film Wanted that Sir Spoonie mentioned, and it's about a man who is Chris Pratt, who discovers his father is a member of a fraternity of assassins, and back in 2008. And I don't know, that sounds to me like a sort of a classic confrontation between your obligations to your family and your obligations to society at large, which is often unfair and unjust. And again, it's often blatantly corrupt or just simply unjust. Middle-class Americans make rules that they expect working class Americans to follow under the threat of violence if they don't. And especially in the 1930s, when working class people were literally starving and dying of various diseases related to hunger, and middle class people were refusing to raise taxes and that sort of thing. I thought it was an ethical failure of leadership that deserved a reaction and a response, which they eventually got through the war.
And good night, Spoon. I said Namor, not Nimoy.
Namor. Let's see.
Just because he says Leonard Nimoy is a villain to you, I'm assuming he's talking.
That was actually to look for some complexity, even in Battlestar Galactica, the episode that we watched a couple of episodes of it today. And in the new episodes, Kara Thrace, who is Starbuck in the new Battlestar Galactica, she is about to get married to this pyramid player who's a hero from the Capricorn Resistance. And he used to be a hero because he was a professional athlete on that game Pyramid or whatever they called it, that weird basketball type game. So she's about to marry him, and Jamie Bamber meets this like beautiful, I think her name is Dee Dee or something, Deirdre. And so he's feeling serious about her. And the story goes on where you show the two of them on Caprica, where they're thinking, oh, we're going to make a new life for ourselves, yada, yada, yada. And then Starbuck gets drunk and is she's trying to get Apollo into a boxing match and baiting him and sort of goading him into boxing. And you're not exactly sure why, but there's an enormous tension between the two. And then as the story gets told in the series of flashbacks, they actually slept together, which you didn't expect to hear. There was always sexual tension, but Starbuck was actually engaged to Zach, Apollo's younger brother. So he had sex with his younger brother's fiance. And then she is just a complete agent of chaos because she's trying to screw up his relationship with Dee Dee. And then Bamber, again, tries to do the right thing. He says, oh, well, in the morning, okay, you tell this guy you're not going to be married anymore. And I'll tell Dee Dee that I'm breaking it off and we're going to be together as a couple. And she's like, nah, none of that. I'm hungover and, yada, yada, yada. And then the next flashback, she's gone and married the pyramid guy that morning down by the river. And then that afternoon or that evening, Apollo proposes to Dee Dee, this beautiful, stunningly beautiful black like assistant or officer who works in the command center. And I don't know, to me, that's just complexity. Human beings are inherently self-destructive, and there's a motivation for marriage that's actually self-destructive rather than, oh, let's go and, healthily raise 2.2 children for the good of society. It's like, no, they all got drunk, tore one off with the wrong person, and then now they're marrying someone that they didn't have sex with because they had sex with each other. Like, that's, to me, that's good drama. It's conflict, and it's realistic conflict because humans have an inherent self-destructive streak in them. So yeah.
But anyway, so the earliest dating I have is back from November 1st, 2023. That's that was like at least that's around the time I started, having the community tabs and stuff. That would have probably been Marvel Mystery Comics number 4. So that would have been like in the middle of that first Namor story. We would have been.
You said that was June?
No, that would have been okay. So we covered it in September 1st, 2023.
Okay, so you probably want to go back a few more months before that if you want to get to number 1 Marvel Mystery. I think that's where
the only problem is you're gonna have to go, because remember, we're getting to the point now where we're going like 13 weeks at a time now for each month we're covering.
Yeah,
and getting more and more. So it's gonna, you're gonna have to go back quite a bit of a ways then,
Yeah, that's why I say a few months. So we did that in September of last year, number 4. So you're doing about every 2 weeks or every 2 months. So I'd probably say around March to try and find number 1 of 2023. But anyways, with all that said, maybe we should get on to the article that you wanted to go over about.
It's not necessarily an article, but it's a kind of a story that's been covered the last couple of days. There hasn't actually been an article written about it, but it has been talked about a lot. It's actually based on a question that, of course, Elk, you kind of, or not as much a question, but something you brought up the other day that I did look into. Anime UK popularity. All right.
And hello, Uprising.
And I was hoping that Metal would be here too, because I figured he might have some things to say on this particular topic too. So you asked me the other day, Elk, if Nick Rekieta had been arrested. I told you I wasn't aware of that. Then again, I hadn't been following yet. It does turn out that he has been arrested. He was arrested on Thursday.
He could be out by now, but still.
Well, yeah, he's out on bail now, but apparently he's now, for those who don't know who Nick Rekieta is, he's a what they call a law tuber. He's a YouTuber who focuses on legal topics. Of course, I got to know him a little bit during the whole coverage of the Vic Mignogna situation. He was the one who was covering the legal aspects of that. that's where I met him and Tug and Yellow Flash, and Hero Hay, and that's and basically during the Vic coverage, of course, I was watching him more then. Once that had kind of run its course, and once he started going back to more mainstream legal stuff, that I myself had stopped kind of watching him. But apparently, as I've been watching a lot of the coverage the last few days here, so apparently he's been kind of on a downward spiral over the last year here.
Do we know what he was arrested for, supposedly?
Yeah, so the 3 counts that he and his wife. Now there were 3 people. He and his wife, and then the live-in girlfriend. The live-in girlfriend just had 2 of the accounts. So the 2 counts that all 3 of them were charged with was felony possession of a Schedule 1 drug. They apparently found cocaine and cocaine paraphernalia at his house.
Oh, wow.
And weapons possession of somebody under the influence. Those are the two charges I think that all 3 of them were basically charged with. And then the one charge that was just Nick and his wife was child endangerment. This was all sparked like a week before his arrest, when somebody walked into the I guess this police station where he lives as a mandatory reporter. I guess there's an issue that came up, and then in doing, I guess, a welfare check or whatever, that's how he ended up getting arrested. But apparently Nick has been on a bit of a downward spiral over the past year. The speculation is part of it may have been due to this lawsuit that he a defamation lawsuit from somebody called Monograph. Now, I had heard about this initially, and I just dismissed it as just somebody else who was disgruntled with what he was, with some of his commentary about them, and trying to like silence him. Apparently the lawsuit didn't go over as well for Nick. That was one of the contributing factors. Another contributing factor apparently was now he was covering a couple of big trials also during the last year. One of them being the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, and he would be in a situation where he'd be like having all-night streams, getting drunk, and then getting up in the morning. That's what led to this mandatory reporting, I think, is he had an all-night stream, and and then would take his kids to school on only a couple hours of sleep. Now apparently what happened after these, I guess, some one of the guys a guy named Dragon Treasures, I watched his video on it, on Nick's downfall. So apparently what happened was, after these 2 big trials, he apparently had been so wiped that he went on vacation, and when he came back from vacation, that's when things really kind of just started going downhill. Started chasing away a lot of the fans that were with him throughout much of his, and he even changed his coverage. He went from covering legal stuff to doing relationship advice. And instead of hanging out with people like that umbrella guy, Tug, and Flash and them, he started hanging out with people who were, let's say, leading him into bad behaviors, as it were.
Wow.
Basically doing more drugs, drinking more, and all that.
So he basically got in with the wrong crowd, as you might say.
So who were these people that he was hanging out with that were bad influences?
Well, let's see. according to at least some of the coverage, one of the guys was Dick Masterson. A couple other guys he started to hang out more with. In fact, let me go find the.
Yeah, definitely sad, because he was a fairly big YouTuber, and getting a.
Yeah.
I know some people it works for being on stream and being drunk, rising, but somebody like a law guy, I don't think that would work.
Yeah.
And I
Well, the
can't
thing
think
is, he really apparently. Now, granted, I haven't watched him in a while because I had, again, I more or less lost interest.
Yeah, and I get that, but like if you're gonna do the legal,
I simply lost interest because again, I was looking, I was wanting to focus more on niche content.
yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and put for anybody who wants to watch this themselves.
You're gonna put a link in the chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a link in the chat for those who want to watch this. This guy gives a pretty good timeline of how all this happened, and kind of explain.
Yeah.
This is somebody who was once another one like other people. Apparently, though, at some point, Nick. And I guess I'll keep it highlighted for a moment here. But Nick apparently was getting involved with something wrong. I mean, some of the people he got involved with were people he once really criticized. There was some people. One of the points this guy made is Nick, like a lot of people, was really highly critical of the. I don't know if you guys have heard of the movie Cuties.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, very controversial movie. He was initially critical of the people and the people who were defending it, critical of them, but then he started actually, by this point, had started to actually hang out with them. So, but hello, Jason.
Yes, hello, Jason. So yeah, it's definitely a little interesting. Hanging out with the wrong crowd. If he's being sued because of the legal stuff, I get, wanting to maybe get away from it a little bit, or just, if you're going to be still covering it, just you're a lawyer, start covering your bases a little better.
Well, one of the things that happened this past, even 2 days before he got arrested, because Tug has talked about this on his streams, and I think he mentioned it again last night on Yellow Flash's Flashcat, and I did watch some of that because I wanted to see what they had to say about Nick. But I think Tug, Flash, some of that group of YouTubers, as well as some of the law tubers, they were all planning on getting together to do an intervention for Nick. They were planning because he had really taken a
nosedive.
Thank you, Jason, for that. Let's see. Dude was on meth on stream. No. That was a theory. That's a theory that was thrown out there. That Nick may have. Well, not that he was doing that. Not that he was pleasuring himself, as it were. But some people were saying because there was some enhanced audio. Okay, so what Goodman Spoon is talking about, and I was just about to get to that
too. Nick Rekieta, Timothy. We're talking about Nick Rekieta.
Nick Rekieta.
Apparently,
Rekieta Law. That's who we're talking about.
On Thursday, he was arrested for basically doing cocaine. Him and his wife.
And their living girlfriend. Oh, snap.
Yeah, he had a throuple going.
Yeah. But no, so what happened was, so what Goodnight Spoon is referring to here in terms of that, he wasn't pleasuring himself, nor was what was actually said happening, or at least they don't believe. Some people say he just
Was overtired. Doesn't make it true. Sure.
doesn't make it true. Essentially, so what happened on last Tuesday, the 21st, he did a stream where I guess he was going to respond. This was coming off of, as I was talking about that lawsuit he was involved with. Apparently, he lost his appeal in that lawsuit. I guess he had lost the initial case and lost the appeal. And when you look at that particular one, he looks pretty bad. He looks pale. He looks pretty ragged. People have even commented he looks even skinnier than he had been before. He was a pretty skinny guy to begin with, but he was even skinnier before. You could just tell the man was wrecked. Okay. Now, what Goodnight Spoon is alluding to is that there are some people who said there was enhanced audio that was played where it sounded like Nick was having oral copulation done to him.
And hello, Whoopsie.
Yeah, sure, I saw that video, and either he was doing a very, very good job of imitating oral magic, or it was indeed happening. And
well, no, what some people are claiming might have been happening, he might have been trying to slap himself to keep himself awake. That's what,
no, his arm was down in the position, and there was a certain banging and slapping.
But
no, there wasn't that space. He had it right under his desk. His legs were pressed against the desk, and there was. Again, he was either doing a really good imitation of it, which definitely could be, or it was actually being done. And he was so loud.
Woozy apparently knows more about the lawsuit because, again, he may have been paying more attention. But the appeal was just on a single point of the lawsuit. A major part of the lawsuit itself will carry. So I guess this lawsuit's still going on then. So again, as I said, I hadn't. Dude was timed. He was well. Yeah, I think most people agree he was high. I think most people agree on that he was.
Yeah, and if he was high, he could have been doing something inappropriate on the stream. When you're high, you don't have the best judgment.
But
his hand could have been down at his crotch, and he could have been imitating it. But he was so high, I don't think his judgment appeared to be so impaired that I mean, he could have been doing it, he could have been imitating it, but it was a damn good imitation without actually seeing it. I guess we'll never know until actually he'll blab about it sooner or later. Once the heat is off, he'll tell us the real story. And he's facing a theoretical maximum of 25 years because he had
27 because of all three. He has one charge of nearly an ounce of cocaine.
25 ounces.
They are an ounce of that they are saying theoretically maximum 25 years. Well, yeah, he supposedly had 26 point, like close to 27 ounces of cocaine is what they said he had. Maximum of 25 years, but in reality, with his record, maybe a couple of years. And then on the other two charges, on the weapons charge, 364 days max, and the child endangerment, 364 days max. So maximum total prison time could be 27 years, but because he's never been arrested before, they're believing that what will most likely happen, since this is his first offense, they're going to try a diversion program first. So, keeping up with Nick is a full-time job. Well, yeah, and as I've even said, I hadn't in a while because, again, once the Vic stuff, I mean, I did kind of watch some of the other stuff but then once I devoted mostly to,
Meat snooze.
meat stuff, I just, so I wasn't even aware he was having these problems, but until Elk actually said something to me in the chat the other day.
His first downfall videos actually came out a month ago. He apparently, and this is speculation, but he published some photos of him and his wife in a hotel. And it's a hotel I drove by several times. It's Hedonism 2 in Jamaica. And it's a sex club, a swingers club. And someone tracked down other photos where the sign was visible that it was Hedonism 2. And again, it may have been some bizarre imitation where two architects made the same wall and made the same couch and made the same light fixture, and then one was in Hedonism 2 and one was in, I don't know, the Ramada Family Inn in Missouri, or it certainly seemed like he took his wife to a sex club, and then there's the throuple allegation.
So here's the thing about so in the video link that I shared earlier, right? In the video link I shared earlier and I'll of course put it up again here for those. But okay, Metal's here now. It looks like, and I hopefully. Hey, Metal. So have you been listening to? We've been talking a bit about what's been going on with Nick Rekieta.
Oh,
you know who that is,
no,
right?
I was away. I know who Nick is. Yes.
Do you know what's been going on within the last few days?
Unfortunately, yes. Also, I saw the wrong profile picture on.
Yeah. So, and I put the link up to the link I shared earlier, but let me get caught up with these chats real quick, and then we'll get back to the discussion. Let's see. Good night, Spoon. Put in context the follow-up question: why is the camera still on? That is not a concern of someone trying to wake themselves up, thinking otherwise is naive. I'm just going based on what everybody's saying, and I don't. And
you don't necessarily believe it or not believe it.
Happening. I'm not going to assume just because everybody else wants to have wild speculations and wants to go down the dirty path. Hey, did have the broken Android thing going on. They smashed that all together into the plea deal. Sadly, I know a lot more about the process than I wish I did. You're talking about the court process or the lawsuit there, buddy? There will be some interesting legal jockeying. All right. So, anyways, so now that
on that legal jockeying idea, when Nick made his bail appearance, what he did was, interestingly, he claimed that he was representing his wife and the throuple member as their lawyer. He not only claimed he was self-representing, which every lawyer said was a dumb idea, he also claimed he was representing his wife and the throuple member, who are actually co-defendants. And the judge allowed him to talk to his quote-unquote clients. And then and only then, he was informed that the throuple member had been bailed out early before Nick and his wife, and she had already retained other counsel, leading to speculation that she had turned state's evidence against him. And that's why she was.
Well, the thing about that throuple member, her name was April Inholte, I believe. She's actually in the process of divorcing a YouTuber named Aaron Inholte, I believe. They're in the process of divorce. I think Aaron was one of the ones who may have turned some evidence as well. But
hello, Solid.
Yeah, Solid Redfield's back. We haven't seen him in a while. Hey, Solid.
Yes,
speculating that
Solid.
someone who is clearly high doing something completely innocent is equally speculative as going with the visual evidence. Oh boy. Hey there, sounds like you're talking about the Ricada Madness. Yes, we're talking about the Ricada Madness. I've been ground up in the big criminal cases and one big expense. I've been ground up in the big crim and one big expensive civil case. It's an expensive habit. Let's see. I'm also listening to Kino Casino discussing the air with Aaron right now on Kick, and that was a neat trick to get to talk to Kayla. Yeah, but anyway, so now even though supposedly now Nick did apparently delete the stream from Tuesday. He did apparently delete, but somebody archived it. So I did now. Why I did not watch the whole thing through. I kind of just went through it and just tried to figure out. And there were a few things that I noticed too. That okay, this guy's in trouble here. Okay, like one of the things, and this is something that that I would have never seen before. Okay, so apparently there was a big block of time in there. I guess about 45, 50 minutes there, where he had his the headline up where he said, "Host is off peeing in the bathroom." He would not have had that. He would have had something up, but he would not have had it up like that. Okay. Also, from the video, from the link I showed you guys, from what I saw, apparently, again, and as I mentioned earlier, he had gone from talking about legal cases to relationship advice. He actually even had a stream on where he with a bunch of other people, no avatars, mind you, everybody was on camera. Supposedly, I guess, or the illusion, anyways, was they were all naked and drinking on it. So,
Metal, were you gonna say something before we got into everything again?
No.
You got no comment on all this?
I would prefer to have no comment on all of this.
I was thinking about not covering this at all, but the only reason I decided one, Elk was actually the one who brought it to my attention that he was arrested the other night towards the end of my stream. So in part to answer his questions, but also since I knew Nick too, I wanted to look into it at least a little bit and find out what exactly was going on. Let me get caught up again on some of these chats, and man, these chats keep coming. Elk, you might want to read this one because this one's directed at you.
Oh, sure. At the Elk, I noticed that right away, and you're the first person I've heard to say it about the legal maneuver to get to talk to them before arraignment. Oh, hell yeah. Did that stick out like a sore thumb? Because he was sitting there really passively, like he was just going to take what was coming to him. And then he came up with this bullshit. Oh, Judge, I have 2 clients I haven't been able to talk to, and the jailer has forbidden me to talk to my clients. Not mentioning for a second that the quote 2 clients are his wife and the his co-defendants, and that he was using that as an excuse to talk to his co-defendants. I thought he had real clients for a moment that, had a real, and the hilarious part was he was also caught in his own bullshit because one of his so-called clients had already been bailed out and he had no idea about it. So she obviously is no longer his client.
Okay, now an update on that situation. An update on that because Tug mentioned this last night. Okay, Tug mentioned this last night on Yellow Flash's stream Flashcast. Okay, so now Nick is no longer self-representing or representing the other 2. Okay, now I know everybody says that April, the third member of the third defendant there, has already got counsel, and I believe Nick and Kayla also have counsel. So
Yeah.
he's no longer self-representing.
Yeah, well, that was probably just a quick thing for bail. He probably would have been planning on getting another lawyer, but it's probably fast enough that he could do easy, and he probably didn't realize that she. Maybe I'm being naive in the fact he probably just didn't realize she had already gotten thing because maybe not talked to.
Yeah,
He just assumed, made an ass out
so
of himself.
anyways, let me get to these, and then I want to say something before anybody else says anything more about this. Mr. Medicare believes Nick was possessed by Sonny Chew Dragon. I know Medicare did a stream on it last night. Most of the legal shows are just talking about how dumb it is to represent yourself on and on and on without a thought to probably swapping one out soon. Let's see. Yes, Nick did that with Kumalot. Oh, yeah, Camelot, and that was the other guy they said was kind of a bad influence. That Nick was basically telling Jim to go die in the funniest possible way. All right. So, anyways, before we first off, I didn't necessarily want to get too deep into the details. I didn't want to get into all the speculation theories. I just wanted to just report on what I found out based on covering, coverage, watching the videos, and I didn't necessarily want to get into the whole whether or not he was getting a oral copulation or anything like that. Okay, there are some things I do want to say about the stream because I have since seen the stream. As I said, not I didn't watch it through, but I did see the stream in question, the meltdown stream in question. And I had some notes I wanted to just point out there. And I probably had already mentioned. I didn't necessarily want to get into the weeds of it and get into. I just wanted, the point I wanted to make that, and a lot of the point was from what Tug and is that this man has fallen into hard times, and his downward spiral is very sad. Okay, so let me get these last bits here, and then basically we'll get back to the discussion here real quick. Well, I mean, just saying he was plastered. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I said, he looked pale, he looked ragged, and he looked thin. So that's one of the things. I'm a bad influence on adults.
You missed Goodnight Spoon's one up a bit just before Whoopsie left. Bad influence. I thought we were talking about an adult. Well, adults can be bad influences, and especially metal.
I guess that's what Woozy was pointing out. I guess, or all right, adults or man children, the entire spectrum. All right, it should take me a lot of cocaine to be able to drive at race car speeds. Oh boy. That also includes child. Okay. Anyways,
I'm a very bad influence.
This isn't meant to be a dump fest on Nick. This isn't meant to be. Oh, let's crucify the man. Obviously there's some issues that have happened. Something happened in the last year where the man just has fallen. Okay, and that's a sad thing. The man was probably among the LawTube community. Was probably considered one of the best talents, one of the brightest talents out there. He was able to put into layman's terms for people to understand what was going on in some of these court cases. But something happened where, he ended up going down a wrong path. And
Oh,
that's
I
very
never thought he was a top talented lawyer. I don't think he ever practiced law. I think he only got his law degree like about a year before he started YouTubing, and then he made more money YouTubing. So I don't think he's ever really practiced law.
I think
And the
he
other
did
thing was,
have a law practice. I
even
think
even from that,
I had heard he did have some cases locally, so I think he did practice.
had some cases for about a year, I think. But the Vic Magnana, I cannot pronounce that poor man's name. Vic Magnona. Vic's
Mignogna,
Mignogna.
I believe is
It's
how
like
it's
saying
pronounced. I know
manana,
I
but it's
have trouble with
mignogna.
it too. Everybody has trouble.
Magnana.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the poor guy, he launched a lawsuit, and he, for one, the guy Ty Beard appeared utterly incompetent. He didn't even file things on time, so he had material that wasn't even considered in his case. And the guy billed him the full amount of his GoFundMe, which was like $220,000. And then not only did Ty Beard scrape, even though he wasn't qualified, as far as I could see, in that type of law, he scraped the full 220,000 for him for a simple filing without even a trial. And then he was Vic was penalized costs, which last I was following the case was another $180,000 to $200,000 just from one of the lawyers.
I agree that the case was mishandled, but to vilify Ty over it's a little too much, in my opinion. Okay.
Oh my God!
Yes. I do agree that the case was mishandled. I believe the big problem there was, I think ultimately it's one of those cases where Ty should have still maintained more of a professional decorum and focused more on the case and not as much as going out and partying with Vic. But hindsight's 2020. Okay, and yeah, I agree. There were some things, particularly at the end there, where he waited way too long. The fact that he waited till like literally almost like the last second to file those papers. I even thought that was a dumb move. He should have filed those. But to vilify him over that, I think it's just a little too much. All right.
I don't. I think the guy stepped into something that he wasn't qualified to do over Bill.
He may have been qualified. I think he just made some bad choices in terms of how he handled it. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever tried in that type of
definitely,
law.
it seems like he possibly could have been a little bit incompetent. It's hard to say. We weren't there. Right. There are a few more chats, and then maybe we should see if we can get on to another topic.
Yeah, that's the thing. Every time I try to, we get onto a slant here. So let me see just where exactly we are and all. Because there's a bit of a discussion going on in the chat, which I'm kind of happy for. I hope that
keep metal away from the Benjamin. That's the one that we're at.
Higher spectrum. I'm trying. Let's see.
It's my Goodnight Spoon.
All right. Keep metal away from Benjamin Buttons. Oh boy. All right. Let's see. I really like Nick. There was a few artists, and they're out there drinking, dunking on him. Yeah, and I think that's part of it too. That may be part of his downfall too. Is that people have been waiting to just, they were licking their lips, and I am never going dunking on him, that I am never going to like again. I could name a nearly infinite set of things sadder than an affluent man flushing his life down the drain.
For sure.
Very common occurrence too.
What was that?
This is a very common occurrence too.
Yeah, lots of people flush their life.
But it's still sad nonetheless. Okay.
Yeah.
Think of
there may be sadder things, but it's still sad.
You know the tenderloin. Okay. Everybody's a great quarterback on Monday morning. Yep.
Sure.
That's true. And then, Rick, you might want to read this one.
Goodnight Spoon says, Rick, you can't afford a house, 5 kids, mistress, Hi, George. Do you find this situation sad? Oh, I find it sad, but doesn't mean just because I can't afford it doesn't mean I don't find it sad. My situation probably to me is definitely a lot sadder, but
life is hard to begin with, guys. Life is hard for anybody. Rich, poor, black, white, Asian.
It's hard when your throuple partner snitches on you.
Okay, hold on. I'm speaking. Life is hard to begin with. We don't need to be making it harder by trying to eat each other alive.
Sure.
Okay.
What were you saying now?
Oh, life is hard when your throuple partner bails out early on you on jail, declines your legal representation, and probably turns state's evidence. That I guess that's sure. That's sad. I find it ridiculous, but I mean, he put himself.
I think there are a lot of people who are closer to Nick and to his family who would not find that funny at all.
Yeah.
Okay. There are people who do legitimately care for Vic, or not. I'm sorry, Nick. Who I don't think anybody should find this situation funny. Okay.
I think we could say that though about almost any person we talk about, though, has people close to them that would feel bad for their situation. Honestly, as an outsider who has no personal ties to Nick other than watching his stream several times and getting some entertainment.
I'm kind of the same way, but
the only people I actually feel sorry for in this situation are the kids.
Right.
Because they have no control over the situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is it sad? Yes. Do I feel sorry for him? Not a lot, because he sort of brought it on himself. But beyond that, is there any articles that you got that might be short that we can go over, since we got like another half hour here? Mike, any articles that might be short that we can go over? Anything to try and get us on the topic?
Uber brief one about the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission on Controlled Substance Offenses, and in 20 and 21. Class 5 or class 4 felony drug possession, 85% of them led to a jail term on average of 48 months. And that's what Rick is facing. So, I mean, I guess it doesn't really break out very easily. It's a government document. So it doesn't really break out how many of those people had previous offenses. But just on the face of it, without taking into account previous offenses, Nick has got an 85% chance with that charge of going to jail for, on average, 48 months. But I mean, that also, like I said, that doesn't include probably the biggest mitigating factor. I don't think he's ever been charged with anything before.
Right. He doesn't have a previous, like the maximum he is looking at is 27 years. 25 for the drug possession, and then a year each for the weapons and the child endangerment. Okay, so
yeah, we have to think statistically that most of these sentencings are going to be repeat offenders, as most drug possession crimes are.
Yeah.
But this is a case where he's never been charged before, so they will, from everything I've been hearing, it's most likely what's likely gonna happen is, instead of going to jail, they're gonna probably try to do like a diversion program, or they're gonna try to get him and Kayla into like rehab.
The question I have about that situation is, Nick was literally apparently he was drunk every night on whiskey or scotch, doing his all-night live streams for the last several months. And part of his parole conditions are that he completely, not cut down, not reduce, not be responsible.
He cannot have any alcohol or any mood-altering drugs unless prescribed by a doctor.
He's got a gigantic target on his back, and I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. I mean, how many alcoholics can just one day say, okay, quit cold turkey my all-night benders that I could afford and was doing.
Oh, he can afford a rehab program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, most people on some sort of probation are given that no alcohol, no drugs, no firearms, blah blah blah. That's standard. So he's gonna have to do it, At least
But
as far as I
also,
know, that's pretty standard.
Most of them don't stream and put the evidence of them breaking parole in public view for everyone to see, which a drunk Nick might do.
Yeah. True. That's an entirely different thing. Yeah. You don't want to put that up on things. So he's either going to.
There are people close to him, like Tug and Yellow Flash, because he actually. It's funny because he was actually considering doing a stream the night he got back. The night he bailed out, Friday night. He was considering doing a stream, and. And he ended up not doing it. He basically just realized he just felt like crap and just didn't want to do it. But he talked about possibly doing it. But even like Tug and Yellow Flash have said, "Hey, look, no, you shouldn't be streaming right now, man. You need to slow down. You need to take care of yourself." I mean, now before his arrest, and I mentioned this earlier too. Before his arrest, Tug, Yellow Flash, a lot of that YouTubing community, as well as the LawTube community, they were looking to get together to do an intervention for him. Because as I mentioned, and I don't know if you caught any part of this portion of the conversation earlier, Metal, when I mentioned this earlier, but they were, Nick has been on a downward spiral for like the last year. This is just stuff that just culminated within the past couple of weeks here. But this stuff, apparently this has been going on for like a year. His downward spiral just finally came to a head. And there's this video and I put the link up twice already. I'm going to put it up again here of the video that I watched that kind of gives a pretty good, concise view of basically what's happened this downfall. But anyways, let's see. We're at an hour now. I think we pretty much hit upon it. As I said, I just wanted to just answer Elk's question about what happened. Get it out there. Wasn't looking to get into any big debates. I wasn't looking to crucify anybody or anything like that. I was just wanting to.
Oh, I've seen this video, the Dragon Treasure one.
Yeah, you saw it. Okay. Okay. Before we do move on, though, I do Metal, with everything we've talked about here. I just wanted to give you one, since you kind of came in late. I just wanted to hear if you had anything to say about all this, not necessarily in regards to what we talked about, but anything in regards to like, not anything in the legal aspect, or is there anything more you want to add to this conversation? Hopefully that leads us to more of a positive, thing moving forward.
Just everything in moderation. That's all I got for that. Like.
Yeah, the one thing that I actually super chatted Tug this the other day when he first was reporting on it on Thursday was the best way to deal with addiction to begin with. Best way to not be in that situation is just not to engage in those behaviors in the first place. Now the thing is that
sometimes easier said than done.
That was a little too simplistic, but I don't agree. I come from an alcoholic family on my mother's side, and I've stayed away from alcohol. It's not as hard as people say. It may not be quite as easy as people say. It's also not as hard either. You just have to have you have to have the strength of will to do it. And but to minimize it by saying, "Oh, it's not as easy or it's difficult," I think does a disservice to everybody. In that.
Yeah, well, I say it's not quite that easy because a lot of people they don't realize that they're going to get addicted to something till after they're addicted to it. Some people can drink and not get addicted.
We learn about alcoholism in school, right? We in health class and look. One of the things I have learned that I do know, okay, without having much, is that one of the things they talk about is, and they call it a mood altering drug for a reason.
Yeah.
We've seen cartoons, right? We've seen cartoons where there's the angel and there's the devil on each shoulder, right? Okay. Yeah. Now, one of the things that they talk about that alcohol has a tendency to do, right? It basically has a tendency to weaken the angel half of you, basically. That part of you that tells you that something's wrong or that you're about to screw up. It cuts down your inhibitions.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anybody with any reasonable intelligence should know that if you're told, "Hey, look, this substance could knock out your inhibition. This substance could lead you to doing something stupid, like getting behind a wheel and killing somebody," right? Okay. If you have that knowledge beforehand, then it is a lot easier to say, "Yeah, I'm not going to engage in that behavior because I could end up killing somebody. I could seriously hurt somebody." Okay.
Yeah. I get that, Mike. But the thing is, people have been drinking for thousands of years, and 99% of people don't get addicted to it. And unfortunately,
well, that's also because the word addiction is way too broad in this case because there's many different things, and it's Goodnight Spoon is bringing up. Addiction is really more of a symptom than a disease, but it's sometimes it is because of trauma, sometimes it's something else in life, but also there are physical traits that you're not even aware of, like the way you're wired, or personality traits that can make you more susceptible to getting addicted to something than other people.
Well, yeah, I was actually told that earlier on that I physiologically had the biological predisposition towards addictive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So when with that knowledge, and as I would understand it, this is how they say alcoholism is genetic, right? If you have alcoholics in your family, you know that should tell you that you're biologically predisposed to those addictive behaviors. Even if you only have one or two little sips of drink and it doesn't do anything to you, if you get into the habit of drinking more and more of it.
Well, looking at family history might have more to do with just the biology. It's a broad net that you can cover. It might be because you have biological predispositions. It could also just be something regarding generational trauma where it's, if you are just in this family, they probably have these same cultural habits or whatever that would lead to developing an addictive behavior. There could be many different reasons. But it's just a good sign. If there is a history of alcoholism, whatever the reason for it, it runs in the family and you might be susceptible to it.
Yeah. At that, but
I'm not saying that I'm not addicted because some people would argue I'm addicted to soda, and I have been, and I probably have been since I was a kid, since I first drank it. And, granted, I've cut back, but I don't see that as big of a problem. But knowing that, that's why I've been able to, again, you have to have the strength of will to say, no, I'm not going to do this because I know that, when you think more with this head and not as much with that head, or maybe somewhat not as much with this one, but you think with that one a bit more.
Yeah.
You can you don't have to play the victim. You don't have to just say, "Oh, I'm just simply this way, so I'm not even going to try to do better. I'm not even going to try to do better. I'm just going to I'm just I mean, when I was born, right, doctors were saying the best I could do would be to feed myself and tie my own shoes. That was what one doctor actually said of what you could expect. And look at me. I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah. Well, nobody's saying you don't try. Nobody's saying you don't try and do better. But unfortunately, the thing is, most people don't know they're addicted or going to get addicted till after they are addicted. Most people have to. An intervention has to be done to show that, hey, you're addicted. This is.
I think Rick's right about that. I think most people slide into addictions before they know they're there. They're already in them. I think that's
and also the world is a very muddy gray place where everything's not so clean cut, right? Even addiction, you have to take everything as a case by case basis with an individual, right? Mm-hmm. Including talking about how, like, if you know something lowers your inhibitions. Well, in some cases, failure is having inhibitions in the way, depending on what those inhibitions are, right? If you can do things in moderation, there's some people who can't even speak publicly without a few shots of whiskey. Doesn't mean they get drunk, but they actually need their inhibitions lowered to succeed. The world is just a very, very muddy place, and some people just end up going too overboard, and they don't know they're going overboard until it already happens.
Which may have been Nick's because Nick, I think everybody knew Nick was a heavy.
That's life in the fast lane.
Yeah, Nick was a heavy drinker to begin with, so that may not have been a very helpful situation for him to begin with. But again, and Grant, I know Goodnight Spoon said it doesn't sound very compassionate with me. Well. It may not be, but at the same time, when we pass on from this world to the next one, we're going to have to answer for everything we did. Okay, and if we're trying to hide behind excuses, like, oh, I was addicted, or my grandpa was a slave, or anything like that, if we play victim and all that,
well,
then we're gonna have a very hard road ahead of us.
Yeah, well,
I
obviously,
for everything after death. I thought you just had to say, Jesus absolved me of my sins like everyone else. So sayonara, catch you later, toodles. Isn't that how that goes? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe
well, no. You've got to do it before, not after. I mean it, of course, too.
Yeah.
Just because doing good is hard, and maybe some people may even say naive, doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nobody. I don't think anybody's saying here that we shouldn't try. But unfortunately, a lot of people that get addicted, they get addicted when they're young and don't realize it, and their brains aren't fully developed. I've known people that are addicted, people that aren't. I've run across a lot of people addicted to very different things, in my life. I don't think I've ever been addicted to anything myself.
I think I'm addicted to food. Actually, Rick, to be honest, I think you're probably on one level addicted to food as well. I've lost 80 pounds actually, for which I'm grateful, and I've kept it off for 5 years from now. But that's not enough. Believe it or not, I need to lose more than that, and I haven't.
Oh yeah.
And I've had nights where I've been there in the morning. I planned out, okay, I'm going to eat this, and this all day, and that'll be a healthy number of calories, and it'll be different food groups, and yada yada yada. And then at 11 o'clock, I'll be downstairs opening a bag of Doritos before bedtime. And so, I mean, I haven't ever broken into anyone's parked car to, boost some Hostess potato chips out of their back seat. But on the other hand, I've always had enough money to buy as much food. I could go to the grocery store and trust me, I thought of this, buy all these $14 chocolate cakes, enough to kill me. And it's probably going to kill me earlier than I otherwise would die. It's already put me in the Medicare system. So I'm using up the great Canadian healthcare system and taxpayer dollars more than I otherwise would. I think fatness, to be honest, is the overlooked addiction in our.
Oh, it's the number one addiction in the developed world is food addiction, specifically like processed foods, like fast food and stuff, more than anything, but snack foods. It's the number one. It's more addictive than nicotine is.
Yeah.
And you're talking about people get hooked on this when they're very, very young and they don't know any better, right? Like your parents are taking you to McDonald's and you start getting hooked on this stuff when you're just like a wee little child. And it literally, when you develop a dependency like this, the chemistry of your brain is changed.
Oh, I feel great when I eat a
McDonald's.
Man, when I have a McDonald's all day breakfast, God, that tastes so good. And I know, and on one level, intellectually, I know exactly like Metal said, that it's not good for my health. It's not good for me.
Okay, but let me bring up this point. Okay, let me bring up this point. Would overeating cause you to, aside from yourself, because we know that sometimes that can happen, that can lead to, we know the health, but outside of yourself, okay, would overeating cause you to kill somebody?
If I were deprived of food,
yes, would it cause you to kill somebody outside of yourself? Outside of yourself.
Oh no! If I couldn't afford food and I was facing my own hunger, yes, I'd kill someone to get food if I didn't have a choice. Not
under eating. Over.
Okay, no. There actually is, and there's probably many cases where the actual cause was related to somebody's dependency on these type of foods, but we don't label it because the sign's not obvious. And the thing is, because it changes your brain chemistry, there are certain people who hit certain points of dependency on these foods that if they go hours, not like days, but hours without eating, they start to become irrational, right? They start to become angrier than, you've heard hangry, right? That phrase that people use, hangry. There are probably many violent crimes committed while somebody was hangry because of their dependency, and we just didn't label it that way. And it's less of like how alcohol, while you're on it, causes you to do things. This is closer to withdrawal syndromes, right? Where somebody did a violent act they would not have done otherwise because they were in that angered state of withdrawal from eating food.
Well, look at all the YouTube videos where you see people.
I said overeating, meaning eating too much, not eating.
Yeah, but you only get to this state because you ate too much, right? You created a dependency on this food.
Yeah. Also, maybe families that promote a lot of big eating, because I know my family promoted big eating. Lots of eating. That's another reason. Like I didn't care. I didn't think I was going to get fat, although everybody in my 90% of my family was fat, but especially my dad's side, they just ate and ate and ate. It was eat till you're overfull, but I'm not sure whether I was.
Unlike cocaine addicts who like literally run out of money to buy the amount of cocaine they want to consume. In the first world, at least, we almost all make enough money that we can eat enough that we'll die before we run out of money. But if we were actually in circumstances where we were hungry, like the classic maroon survivors of a shipwreck, oh hell yeah, I'd kill someone if I.
And that's normal, but that wouldn't be considered murder, though.
Well, it might if you're killing them something over something to eat on a deserted island.
Well, see, what I'm talking about is something that is all more common, but we don't notice it or label it right. Like some overweight person who has a dependency on food, like they've developed an emotional and mental dependency on food, standing in line for 2 hours at like Disneyland, right? And they're starting to get hungry, and the person in line in front of them just bumps into them wrong, and they get into a fight because of it, because that person is now angrier than they would have been otherwise. right? And that's a subtle example.
Yeah.
But there likely have been murders committed for this exact emotional state, and we're just not recognizing it because of the culture of our society.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
effect of
definitely get
the
edgier
effect of
when I'm hungry.
food on you to alcohol is slightly different, So
It's the opposite direction.
It's hard to compare the two in a little bit.
Yeah, like what I'm saying would be the equivalent, which doesn't usually happen with alcohol specifically, but it does with other things like, say, nicotine. People get edgier if they go too long without it. But the equivalent would be here in the alcohol case, would be if you had developed an dependency on alcohol and you started getting more violent because you went 3 days without drinking it, or actually in this case, even just a few hours without drinking it. Though people who go through alcohol-specific withdrawals tend to just become lethargic in between until you hit a certain state, then they might become violent. Like people have actually held up liquor stores before to get alcohol.
What's that sound? I think I heard it earlier too.
That's a dramatic opening screen of a piece of art I'm working on. Sorry, it's
Yeah. So, anyways, my point has always been, I think though we've gotten to the point where people are not taking enough personal responsibility for their behaviors, and just
that I can agree with 1,000%.
It's like it's always somebody else's fault and not. That's where I was going with.
Well, it's a mix though, right? Because to a certain degree, personal responsibility can only go too far, especially when your mind is literally changed to a point that you wouldn't be able to. Everything, because we are social creatures, we live in society with other people. There has to be a mix of personal and social responsibility, and I'm not saying that has to come from the wider social area. That needs to come to your personal community, the people you are close to. There is a social responsibility you have for the other people around you.
Mm-hmm. Because again, that's where I'm at with it. I may be old school. Some people may want to call me naive, but I ultimately think that the way I think, the principles I hold to, I think that is the best way. Now, granted, it doesn't mean I'm going to try to force others to agree with me.
Yeah, well, I think we can all agree that personal responsibility in people has fallen over the last, say, 50 years, maybe even the last 10 to 20 years. And yeah, we need more personal responsibility for sure. Being responsible for our own actions, each of us. Obviously,
But I think that's related to social responsibility, right? Because what weight does your personal responsibility have if there's not social accountability outside of yourself? What's the driving factor for you to change if it's not for the people around you?
Yeah. Well, in a sense, like smoking. Smoking was once very social acceptable. Now it's not. So a lot of people are quitting smoking. So they do it because personal responsibility and somewhat social responsibility.
Yeah, and we are now more isolated than we've ever been. So that social factor is kind of at an all-time low.
But Metal, let me ask you this: would you say that because of what you just stated right there, you think that's what led to a lot of the strife and a lot of the problems we've been having that have come through social media?
Probably, right? Because we think that we're more connected, but we're actually less, right? We don't actually have the tight-knit communities that we used to have. And people try to form them elsewhere, but they're not really tight.
Yeah. Well, I think as people, right, even though we have a good rapport right now, the four of us here have a good rapport through the screen, and of course I myself have met Rick before in person, when he came to California. I think though that ultimately we're at our best when we are face to face with somebody and talking to them. It's like this whole idea of hiding behind avatars or social media and all that. I think that is a dehumanizing factor.
That definitely can
cause a lot of the problems that we're having in our society right now.
Yeah, because unfortunately there's a lot of keyboard warriors, as the phrase goes. And I'm going to apologize to Goodnight Spoon right now for us missing like a lot of his comments for the last 10, 15 minutes. He's put in like, 30 comments that we haven't read.
Yeah.
And
I
don't
did
think we're
respond to
going
one
to
of
get...
his most recent ones. But it's just to reiterate, because he's talking about there's only so far the social responsibility. No, and that's why I said it doesn't have to be broad, but I should say probably shouldn't be broad. More specifically, I'm talking about our evolved herd behaviors, because we are herd creatures. We've always been in some type of tribe or family structure. No matter what your beliefs about the start of the world are, from the beginning, we've always been at least in a family, and that is how we are developed.
Creatures.
Yeah, we are developmentally that way. So when I'm saying social responsibility, I'm talking local. Like, I used the wrong herd there because I wasn't thinking about what I was typing. I shouldn't have an A. But I'm talking about the local group, the small community that you are a part of, that is part of your mental and emotional health.
Right. I think I get what you're saying, because I mean, like, for me, even though I do spend most of the day in my room here, I do get out a couple of times. I go up to the store to get my energy drink in the morning, and then I go out maybe in the evenings to get my meals. Whether I'm picking something up from 7-Eleven or going up to McDonald's, they grab. But as I am walking, though, I walk to the store. I encounter people along the way. I interact with. I mean, and even when I'm coming in or out of the store, if I see somebody else about to come in or leave the store, I'll of course hold the door open for them with no expectation whatsoever.
Yeah, and then there's your interaction with your sister and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you live in the same house.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that part, and anybody else who happens to live in the same house with you.
Yeah, if you had a job, your coworkers might be part of your herd. If you attend a church, your church family might be part of your herd.
Yeah.
It's people have their local herds, and frankly, one of the big problems is that people are more disconnected from their herd or tribe than they used to be in the modern day, and that has led to a lot of behavioral problems.
Again, we're caught up being trying to be keyboard warriors.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different reasons people get disconnected, or feel disconnected.
Mm-hmm. I'm not on board with tribalism, but I agree with Metal to the degree that what he is discussing is pro-social, good for you, your family, your friends, neighbors, and community.
Oh, and I'm not pro-tribalism either, like treating people in-group, out-group. The issue is it's just the way we've developed. You will always have an in-group, right? That doesn't mean you have to treat the out-group negatively because of that, but a lot of your health is based on how you interact with your in-group, which is why I always talk about social health, the other edge of the triangle that people always forget about when talking about physical and mental health. It's something that kind of just gets left to the side.
Yeah, just because life is difficult doesn't mean that you don't try to do good, do right.
Yeah.
Just because life is hard doesn't mean you don't still try to do what is good and right. Anyways, we are just past the 2-hour mark, and I'm sure you guys are tired of talking about this deep stuff already. I think it probably is a good time to start wrapping up, and we'll do of course this weekend in each history segment, and then I'll give you guys a chance to close everything out, and then we'll wrap up. Does that sound good to you guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, anyways, let me just review here. May 26th, 04. And because of the fact there are only 2 years involved here, I'm gonna do a little. Usually, I would do it by the date, but I'm gonna actually, where I do all of one day and all of another. But I'm gonna actually do it by the year this time because there's only 2 years that are involved in all 4. So, all right, 1944.
Funny, good night spoon. Funny.
I mean, to be fair, even the old podcast I have was mostly just games and movies anyway. And that's mostly because of the co-host I have. If I wanted to do a podcast like this, I guess I could do a solo one, or I'd have to just find a co-host who was interested in doing stuff like this.
Oh yeah, you did get the part of my message where I said if he wanted to, you could have invited Marsupial along too, right?
Listen, I've told you this before. It's hard enough to get Marsupial to show up on time to the show that he's already agreed to do twice a week.
All right. I figured he would probably want to chime in on the Nick because I know he was on the podcast in the chat last night. Anyway, so
he would like to talk about this type of stuff too, but
yeah,
he was also the one that was talking about more focusing our show type, so we'd have to do yet another show, maybe later in the evening or something if you want to talk about this specific stuff like the Nick and all that.
Yeah. All right. So, anyways, so first off, I would actually like to wish a happy, so we're going to yesterday, going back to 1944 as it were here. I'd like to wish a happy 80th birthday yesterday to American actor, filmmaker, and puppeteer Frank Oz. Now, the name may not necessarily sound familiar, but he does have a pretty really famous role here. He's the voice of Yoda in the Star Wars franchise.
I think everybody knows who Frank Oz is.
Well, I didn't until I read this, but then again, I'm not
really.
Well, I can't say I didn't hear the name. I'm pretty sure I heard of the name, but I probably didn't know that he did Yoda.
No. He was the other half. No. Jim was Kermit. Frank was like Miss Piggy and the other half of the voices, and he also played Cookie Monster and
he did Jim Henson's stuff. Now he also provided the voice of Jeff Fungus in Monsters Inc. and the subconscious guard Dave in Inside Out. But I guess the big thing he's known for here, according to this, is that he was the voice of Yoda in the Star Wars franchise. So happy 80th birthday to him.
Yeah, and Fozzie. He was the other half of the Muppets with Jim Henson at the beginning. Like, he was a huge part of it.
So, and also going back to yesterday, but just going back 20 years ago, yesterday as it were,
Only 20?
On yesterday's date 20 years ago, since I find it here, Hugo the Negotiator. Yeah, Hugo the Negotiator, which the first half of the series was done by G&G Direction. Second half was done by Artland. Hugo the anime Hugo the Negotiator completed its run on yesterday's date 20 years ago. So 20 years ago yesterday, Hugo the Negotiator completed its run on Japanese television.
Where did Hugo the Negotiator go?
Anyways, all right. So now moving on to today's date, as on today's date 80 years ago, back in 1944. So I pull that up.
1944.
All right. So on this date in 1944, I'm sorry, I didn't even give you a chance to intro Metal, but we're.
I think it's probably for the best.
Yeah. On this date 80 years ago today, the 40th issue of Shadow Comics from Street and Smith, and we are going to start reading Shadow Comics in a couple weeks here. We're looking at Shadow Comics 1 and 2, but on this date 80 years ago today, the 40th issue of Shadow Comics went on sale from Street and Smith. And also on this date in 1944, in 2004, 20 years ago today, on this date, 20 years ago today, during their weekly pay-per-views on this date, or broadcast of their weekly pay-per-views at the time, Total Nonstop Action, which was at the time an NWA affiliate, debuted its TNA World X Cup, a four-team points-based tournament featuring stars of the X division. So on this date, 20 years ago today,
Geez.
they,
TNA Wrestling had an X division.
yeah.
That
Well,
does
okay.
not sound good.
Just so you know, the TNA part stands for Total Nonstop Action. The X division was more or less what traditionally would have been considered like their cruiserweight, their junior heavyweight, cruiserweight, light heavyweight. With the exception is they just don't have a weight limit. But a lot of the more like smaller, either mat-based wrestlers or high flyers were featured in this division. The only difference is you could still have guys like Samoa Joe who were like, when he was competing, it was like 280, whereas in the old days, in fact, their slogan for it was, "It's not about weight limits, it's about no limits." So it was more about the style. It was more about the style as opposed to.
And of course, the TNA Wrestling would also have the World X Cup.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So, anyways, with that, I thank everyone for being here. So, before we head out, and this time we're gonna go, since we started counterclockwise earlier, we're gonna go clockwise here. We're gonna start with Rick, go down to Elk, and then go to Metal. We're going to,
go clockwise and end with
do the
Metal.
outros. All right. Yeah. My mind's going blank. But with that, so we'll start with you, Rick, with outro as always. Promote anything you're doing this week if you want. Share any links. You got the.
Okay. Well, a link for the video that I did put in earlier as well. Just a video with me out and about in Hamilton. I went and did a little bit of a painting of the emblem of my character, Canadian Shield. Unfortunately, it's not the full video because I didn't get the full video recorded like I wanted from start to finish. So it starts halfway or 3/4 of the way through. But look for more of these. I'm going to try and start doing these. I'd like to do 5 times a week, getting out and doing this, putting it up. I'm not sure whether I'm going to shorten them, speed them up, or whatever. Hopefully in the next day, I'll have one that's like 55 minutes. It's the first part of me doing another painting in a similar area to where the first one was done. So, on to Elk.
I guess actually the one thing I'd like to promote is this week we started watching with our little Sunday afternoon sci-fi group the film that's not sci-fi, but it's Baby Reindeer. And it is the #1 show on Netflix, and it has been both in the UK and the US for the last 4 weeks or so. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's all about keyboard warriors and whether you're a part of a community or not, and how we relate to each other. And it's also a show that could only have been made, I would say, in the last 5 or 6 years, and could not have been made at any other time. For a whole host of reasons. They start off superficial, like it's all about being stalked online, but that's just a superficial level. People have been stalking each other for probably forever, for thousands of years. But the more you watch the show, there's only about 6 episodes, and the later you get into it, the more you realize this could have been written in the way that it's been written in the last 5 years or so. And a Baby Reindeer, if anyone wants to watch it and talk about it later, let me know.
All right. Anything more, Elk, or are you good?
No, I'm good. Thanks for the show.
All right. Metal.
Yeah. Though, just to ask Elko question real quick. What you're basically implying is it's something that could evolve into a good long-term period selection for the modern period in the future.
I think it not exactly. It's not sci-fi, so it is a drama. It's a drama, but the more that gets revealed about the people, at first it starts off as a stalking drama, and you can probably guess in your own mind what that entails. It's scary people and someone like the hand that rocks the cradle, that sort of stalking. Everybody knows some idea of stalking, but then as the episodes get and it gets told in a series of flashbacks, you realize this steaming heap of a story could only and would only have been written in the last 5 years. 10 years ago, it would have been written entirely differently. Yeah.
Yeah, this is more of what I was asking. But anyway, on the metal, if you like to hear my odd ramblings about things, though usually these days it is just games and movies, or anything in those general categories, on Mondays on the Vomitorium Live, you can hear serial talk, movies, TV shows, comics, novels, things like that, mostly the former two. And on Thursdays, you can hear game talk for like gaming, tabletop, things like that. And that's what I do regularly and irregularly. Sometimes I update my fiction site, xdynamuschaos.com, where you can find a collection of web comics and web novels from various different stories and genre. In fact, I just put up a page of the titular story, X Dynamis Chaos, last week. So, yeah, who knows when I put up new stuff there. Go check it out. You could literally spend hours on the site. That's it.
All right. Well, with that, I think everybody for being here. I know we had a pretty lively discussion tonight. I do appreciate everybody. I know we didn't get to as many chats tonight, and sometimes we just get so caught up in the conversation.
That's hard to get to.
All right. So, anyways, but we will be back, and we will be getting back to niche news tomorrow night. Again, I just chose to cover this partly because Elk had mentioned it the other day, and also since at least some of us kind of know who Nick is, I felt like we could at least touch upon it, and
well, in the broader sense of the word, this news was pretty niche.
Yeah. So, well, at least from the, if you look at YouTube communities and all that, YouTube has a niche thing. Yeah, I guess you can make that. But as you guys know, I normally, as I've already said, I usually don't like to really get too much into a whole lot of drama stuff. I know that there's a lot of drama associated with this. I know the reasons for the drama, but since we all kind of knew them, and there are some lessons to be learned from this as well, obviously. So, but with that, we'll be back to our regular niche coverage tomorrow night. Of course, Rick, you'll be back with me this Friday for
and tomorrow night,
because I'll probably have you on to go over some niche news articles. I did have some ready just in case we did have time, but anyways. We'll probably need to look at those tomorrow night. And with that, I thank everybody for being here. I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.